That makes
kind of
quite a bit of sense.
And then Europe also has another tradition that we don't really see in the Eastern traditions, and that's the tradition of the dragon hunter.
What is that?
Well, yeah, because, your knights and...
The dragon hunter is like St. George. St. George and the dragon is probably one of the best known dragon stories there is.
Right.
St. George basically comes across a dragon in the English countryside who's messing things up for everybody, and he kills him. Now, the details are always a little variable depending on who's telling the story, but the long and short of the story is George uses the power of God to kill a dragon.
Okay.
Now, it wasn't just George, though. There's lots of dragon hunters and lots of dragon killers. Probably my favorite would be Beowulf.
Beowulf is probably one of the most popular as far as, fantasy fiction goes.
Well, Beowulf was a tale told by Vikings, an oral tradition story. But like a lot of stories of the oral tradition, monks heard it. Christian monks. And Christian monks had a habit of writing down these stories that were being told in oral tradition to try to preserve them.
Fair enough.
Right.
And so they wrote down the story of Beowulf. Now, I don't want to get too into the Beowulf legend, but some discussion of it is necessary. Essentially, Beowulf gets called to his family home. This great mead hall owned by one of his, I believe his uncles, perhaps? I'm not entirely sure. Mm-hmm. But he comes home because his family needs him, because there's a monster that is killing people in the hall. It breaks in the hall at night, it kills people, it does whatever it wants, and the people in the country are terrified, and no one knows how to deal with it.
Right, of course.
And so, Beowulf and his men come to the mead hall. They have a big feast, because that's what the Vikings did.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pretend to be drunk, but they're not. They pretend to be asleep. Well, they hear the door to the mead hall open, and this creature begins to attack one of Beowulf's men. Well, Beowulf latches onto this thing's arm and will not let go. And eventually, with much strength, rips the creature's arm off, just barehanded.
Oh, Jesus.
And Grendel flees into the night, where eventually he dies.
Great.
Now, at that point, Beowulf discovers that Grendel wasn't the only monster. Grendel has a mother out there, and Grendel's mother is not nice. And she's what what the Vikings used to call a glowworm.
Of course.
And a glowworm was a Viking term for a dragon.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
And Beowulf goes under the water into her lair to kill her. And eventually he finds a weapon that he stabs her with, kills her, escapes her lair with several of his men. They get back to the mead hall. Well, it finds out he got injured in the process. And he has what the Vikings call the onion soup sickness, or the soup sickness. Because Vikings had, if they thought their stomach was injured, and they weren't going to be able to hold food, they would feed someone onion soup, and then you'd be able to smell the soup out of the wound.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what that is?
Interesting.
So that was the soup sickness.
I see.
Good.
Anyway,
sounds more like a soup test, but okay, I'll go with it.
You're dealing with people that
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm just, if it were me, I would have named it something a little different, but we're talking about a long time ago, so I would have thought things differently then, so, like I said, I'm going with it, it's all good.
So, long story short, too late.
I thought it and you said it, that's awesome.
But long story short, Beowulf defeats this dragon and he dies. Now, I take this telling of the tale from Philip Dickinson's Flight of Dragons. Philip Dickinson is a fantasy author who wrote a book that he called The Flight of Dragons, about how dragons fly. And it's fascinating. What he basically did was he put together everything he knew about dragons. And he tried to come up with a creature that would meet those parameters. So, according to Peter Dickinson, dragons fly because they have an immense amount of hydrochloric acid in their stomach. And hydrochloric acid generates hydrogen.
Gases. Gotcha.
And that's what allows a dragon to fly, is it's actually lighter than air. Its body is a bunch of honeycombs of air pockets that get filled up with gas.
Nice.
And according to Dickinson, his idea of a dragon is they are hypnotic. And they get people to strike them in the head because that's where all the scales are.
I see.
And that's where they're more protected. Because if you strike the body, big boom, bye-bye you. Also bye-bye dragon, because you're basically popping a fiery balloon, but still.
Well, yeah.
Bye-bye you, bye-bye dragon. Goodbye.
So, dragons have a hypnotic gaze, like snakes with birds, that gets, if you're going to hit one, you're going to hit it in the head. Because that's where all the scales are, that's where it's protected.
Right, fair enough.
Also, if they produce all this hydrogen, well, they have to get rid of the excess gas somehow. And according to him, if they have an organ in their throat like bombardier beetles have in their backside, they can light the gas, and then that would allow them to control their ascent and descent.
Fair enough.
By getting rid of some of the gas. But it also gives them an effective weapon, just one they have to be very careful about using, because if they burn off all their gas, they can't fly.
Right.
And for a creature that is entirely based off of gas, and being lighter than air, it doesn't want to walk.
Well, no, probably. And I would imagine that it would be a little difficult to walk very far being that big and heavy.
Well, that's just it. According to him, they're very light because they're just these muscly chambers of gas. At least they're light for their size. Let's put it that way. Now, he says the wings aren't there to give the dragon lift, but rather to give the dragon direction, to allow a dragon to move itself in the air. Otherwise, it's just a floating gas form.
I guess that would make sense, because even hot air balloons have to have some method of steering, and then of course we have like the dirigibles that have wings to, let them be more able to be controlled. So that's actually a pretty solid thought process, if nothing else.
Right. And then the few bones that the dragon did have would dissolve when it died because all this hydrochloric acid then just dissolves most of the body.
Right.
And that's... Now, mind you, this was all done very much tongue-in-cheek. Very much as a thought experiment. Can I come up with a reason that dragons' fossils can't be found and a way they could exist?
Sure. And he found out, yes, he could.
Right. And that fascinates me because, really, if you look at it, and especially the way I told it, I specifically told it in such a way that people could see, oh yeah, the bombardier beetle. Oh yeah, serpents with birds and their hypnotic gaze. Oh yeah, this, that, and the other. Is that it's really just a collection of characteristics from other creatures.
Right.
Right.
Now, do I believe that is what a dragon is? No, I don't. I firmly believe that once upon a time, dragons were a thing people could encounter. But I think the world has changed way too much. It's like, for example, there are a number of people who have become lost from groups of soldiers or whatever.
Sure.
And they encountered things and situations that they wrote down because they simply couldn't believe them.
Right.
Or they couldn't believe they were in them. And I honestly think that at one time in this world, if you went by yourself for very long at all, you were going to run into something that most people wouldn't because there were pockets. Pockets where dimensions were a little more free to cross. Now, mind you, this is just my belief. I have nothing to back this up.
Right.
And I think this is what has become levels of reality today. The same thing I've talked about for months now.
Right.
Right.
And I think at that point, if you got lost enough, you might run into a dragon, but I don't think you'd run into one today.
Yeah, no.
I think whatever let people see them, that's done.
That's gone.
Yeah. And I don't even think the French pilot saw one in 1937.
Yeah, no. I think they were long bygone by then.
I mean, it's fascinating that it was reported, but
I still don't think.
I don't know. And maybe this is just me being fanciful, but I like to keep the belief that there are still things out there that are here. I want to still believe that there is magic in the world and that there are things just beyond the realm of what I can see that are there. Now, is that true? Maybe, maybe not. But I like where you're going with that. I just don't want to believe that that's actually gone forever. Maybe it's just been lost for now.
Well, I mean...
yeah, like I said earlier, they could just be up in the clouds or something, playing, like, spades or something. They're just like, what do the humans do these days? It's something boring. Let's go play cards.
I like that. I would like that as well. And heck, within the last 10 years, I want to say, these two computer geeks in Scotland filmed what appears to be a unicorn.
A unicorn?
Yeah, outside the window of their office. Like, not floating in midair or anything. It was appropriate. It was on the ground, but they saw it from their office. They filmed it. It was a horse with a horn. And I've seen the video